Hey, so our next presentation is a faculty panel with Nancy Gupp and Holly Keddington. They are both in psychology. Nancy Gupp is a tenured professor of psychology. She serves as the curriculum coordinator across all perimeter campuses for 2621 abnormal psychology. Dr. Gupp has shown her commitment and support for OER for many years. She is the lead investigator for Round 18 Affordable Learning Georgia Grant Abnormal Psychology. Holly Keddington is a senior lecturer of psychology. She has taught fully online for Perimeter College since 2012, and she is a contributing editor for the Online Learning Journal. Bit by bit, she has transitioned all of her courses to utilizing OER materials. She regularly teaches lifespan development, introductory psychology, and careers in psychology survey course. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for doing this. I talked a little bit during the break about how Nancy and Holly and I have worked on a project earlier, a few years ago. So I'm glad to get to talk to them today. So I don't care who starts, but can you give us a brief description of your projects, your OER projects?
I'll go ahead and I'll start.
Okay.
It's okay with you, Holly. Brief description. I was a lead investigator. I think that was the title for it, for an affordable learning grant, and specifically for abnormal psychology. Abnormal psychology is one of the courses that's required of the psychology major. It is one of the more populated courses because we also have nursing students and dental hygiene students, etc. Course is offered hybrid, face-to-face, online. So, for example, right now, I probably teach. Well, I do teach 10 to 11 sections of it each year for approximately over 12 years, if not more. So it is one of the main courses at Perimeter, and what ultimately the grant was for a transformation grant for a low-cost open educational resource. So when I say a transformation grant, what our goal was it's not completely no cost, but was to make it within the parameters that in the state of Georgia, it had to be $40 or less per student for the course materials for the course. And so our goal was to make it as affordable as possible at that time, and to also as the goal to help it to be a template to help to unify the courses across the 5 campuses at Perimeter. So no matter which instructor that was teaching it, and it goes out, of course, beyond Perimeter, but especially for Perimeter, that any instructor that would like to teach the course, that there was a template that used OER and that was affordable.
Yeah, Nancy's done some really great work with that abnormal psych class. Thank you for all of your work on that, Nancy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
My experience with OER, we worked on creating a master course for Psych 1101, which is the introductory psych course. That was a collaboration with Perimeter and the downtown campuses. And then also, as I mentioned in my bio, just bit by bit, semester over semester, I've created my courses to be all using open educational resources. And so I wanted to highlight, like, there's a big way to make a whole course OER, which is like getting a big grant and working with a big team and setting up the course to be used for others in the future, which I think is wonderful. And there's also just using bits on your own as an instructor and including them in your course, and kind of just building it over time, which is also something that I've done.
Thanks.
I would like to add real quick that ours was a team too. So it was a team of April Crisp, but also as a senior lecturer, as well as Sheehy and Martha Falk both were part of the team for us throughout.
Okay. So what motivated you to do an OER related project?
I'll go ahead and answer. For me, it can be summed up by just saying students. I mean, when you incorporate OER into your courses, it makes it more affordable, and it makes the course more accessible for all the students involved. Also, I have a number of dually enrolled students that enroll in introductory psych, and it's really helpful when the course materials are free or low cost. Also, a big advantage of using open resources is that all students have access to the course materials on day one of the course. So you don't have to delay working with students or getting them caught up, especially for late ads or by waiting for them to get their textbook materials. And that's just one of the main advantages, I think. What about you, Nancy? What's your motivation?
Well, I echo that, but it also was to help reduce some of the DWF rates, so student concerns. But we, we were able to get statistics that looked at how many students were not buying their course materials, because course materials before using open educational were anywhere for abnormal. When we looked across instructors, was anywhere from like $79 at the least expensive up to $100 and close to like $50 or $60 just for that course alone. And you know, so many of our students do have concerns, which is understandable, about materials. So we were able to see that students were not accessing course materials, one, because of the cost. And so it was a real motivator to be able to not only have the open educational resources because of the cost, but what I found with partnering is that it allowed for students across different modalities. So if a student, if I is in my online or in a hybrid, or if it's totally face to face, that the materials are easily able to be tweaked, and that I can also have the tools to help to monitor, to see, you know, who is accessing and who is not, and to really help to drive with messages and announcements, etc. Those students that not only are not accessing, but those students that are doing well, and to keep giving that encouragement that, you know, we always are promoting. And I think last, but another issue for me, which always has been, is looking at accessibility. And I'm finding that more and more the open educational resources are keeping up, not all of them, but more of them, especially the one that we're using for our courses, in regard to looking at, are the courses accessible if the student is blind, or if the student has hearing problems or needing accommodations. And so that was also a big draw in the field of psychology for us.
Yeah, I was just going to add along that lines too, that it is motivating. I've been looking at OER resources for over a decade, and they have improved like dramatically over that period of time. And it's super motivating to use these products because they're like they're available, they're low cost or free, and they're very high quality.
Great. So tell me about the development process and how did it go? You want to start, Nancy?
Yeah, I can start. Well, first we had to, I don't want to get too long-winded here, but first we had to develop the team. And no matter that I'm a psychologist, you know, developing a team can be challenging. And so that was the first part of trying to find people that were really interested, because one, just submitting and writing the grant is extremely time consuming from the get-go. And then it required for our team to meet almost weekly for over a year, and then there's follow-up. So getting a team that was very committed was part of that process. And luckily we were able to do that with the team that I mentioned. They were extremely dedicated. It also was in the process for us to select and interview the different OER vendors. because we were using open educational resources, but we also wanted a platform that was low cost that would help with the online portion of it. And so that was very time consuming in regard to one, because there seems to be more and more, but really scrutinizing and coming up with a rubric on selecting and interviewing, and narrowing it down, and helping to negotiate not just the cost, but helping to try to figure out the cost for the bookstore too, and specifics like that.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of really good points about working with a team and working on a big project. I like how you mentioned that you had to work with the vendors to find the product that would work the best. Those group decisions can take some time for sure. I wanted to speak a little bit to incorporating OER, maybe not from like a group or a team perspective, but maybe just like as an individual instructor. And it also involves a lot of weeding through resources to see what's going to work, what's not going to work. Kind of looking, because sometimes you think you find the thing that's going to work the best, and then you find, oh, it's not the right level for my class, or it's not going to cover the material, or it's only going to cover this portion, and you find something to make up for the other part too. So it takes searching.
Yes.
Also part of our team, and Sheehy was such a really a godsend for this, is that we had to make sure that along with our open educational resources, that whatever we tied in, if they were articles or research projects and things like that, that they met the scrutiny that was required to be able to be used. And Sheehy was an incredible help in reviewing them and making sure that we were upholding copyright laws and things like that.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you address them?
I'll speak to, we kind of talked about weeding through materials and how that can be kind of time consuming and kind of a search, but I was also going to talk about just creating assessments. Sometimes when you use a textbook that's published that costs $160 for the students, it comes with instructor guides and PowerPoints and test banks and some kind of nice resources. So a challenge with that is that we've had to create all of our own assessments and assignments and instructor resources, which is time consuming. But I just wanted to say, like, a positive of that at the end is also that the test questions aren't out on the internet for all the students to search and find the answers to, which I have found a lot of test banks are just widely available for students to search. So what about you, Nancy? What did you find to be a challenge?
Well, we created discussion questions and PowerPoints as well as the assessments and things like that. So that was challenging. Whenever you're working with the team to sometimes come to an agreement. But we were able to do that. There was a little challenge, and I hope it's not inappropriate for me to say here, is that because it was a grant, some money went back to departments and some money was given to faculty, and that was a challenge at first, to have everybody kind of an understanding that we don't really as a team have any control over where the grant money goes, but also understanding that people are in different positions in regard to compensation, etc. And I think that worked out very well, but that was a challenge that we had at the beginning of the time. And then, since it is a continuous for us, I know that it's constantly a challenge to keep the cost low, because what we found is that the vendors understandably increase their prices. And so we either have to start to look for something else or continue with almost being somewhat like salespeople of negotiating and realizing what else is out there to say, let's have a discussion here. And it also was a challenge regarding the bookstore, because the bookstore has at least a 20% upgrade unless you negotiate that. And so to try to make sure that there is some understanding between the bookstore and open educational and everything else that comes together.
That's a good point. Were there any pleasant surprises? Maybe not.
I
Yeah.
mentioned before that the assessments, the students can't, it's not as easy to cheat on assessments that you create on your own, which is a pleasant surprise. Also, I noticed that when the assessments were created by me or by our team, that they were higher on the Bloom's taxonomy scale, meaning they weren't just like asking for facts, like regurgitation, but more personal application of the materials. And we incorporated more like essays or the more creative assessment measures. And I think that that was more engaging for the students in the long run.
That's great.
Yeah, I was surprised at how much students liked it. Because we've integrated surveys at the end of the class just related to course materials and open educational specifically. And I was not expecting as positive a response beyond the cost factor, but positive a response in regard to the quality of the materials and in the learning outcome in regard to grades.
Yeah, I've had faculty tell me they didn't think the students would value the book if it wasn't expensive. So I'm really glad to hear that that was not true.
I was going to mention another positive with using
Okay.
something like OpenStax text, for instance, is we've used them for our introductory psych class, and they are constantly updating it. So it is kind of nice that it's always updated and that the links always work. So sometimes when you create some things in your own online course, for instance, the links are dead after a certain period of time. But that's a nice thing about using some of these OER resources.
That's great. And so what was the outcome of your projects in terms of student success? I mean, you talked about that a little bit, that the students really enjoyed the material.
Yeah, student evaluations have been pretty high on the courses, which is nice. They feel engaged, like I was mentioning before. It's not, they feel like they're a part of the course, which is wonderful.
And I echo that. I also have seen more participation.
And you talked earlier about them actually doing the reading, or at least opening the reading. I guess you can't tell for sure that they actually read it, but you could
That's
tell that
right.
they opened the link to the reading. So
Yes.
yeah. And I know, I don't know, Nancy, if you only teach online anymore, or you're face to face, but Holly's totally online. So does that have an impact on the use of using OER?
You know, it has not for me. I use it for across all modalities, the hybrid.
Okay.
And at this point, I mainly teach abnormal and intro, and I use it for both.
Okay.
So I have not seen, no.
That's good to hear that it's working in all modalities. It works really well online, obviously, but interesting to hear about the hybrid and face-to-face.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So what advice would you give to other people who were thinking about developing an OER project?
My first advice is you can totally do it.
That's right.
And also just to keep in mind that there's different, you can bite off a small amount or a big amount. Like you can go for the big grant with the big team and the year-long project, or you can go as small as just trying to find a cheaper book that you can use in your class, like OpenStax, just trying to use OpenStax in your class instead. Or yeah, that's my advice, is just don't be like don't be put off by the idea of using OER resources because it seems too big or it can really fit what you need.
I think one of the things that doesn't come across that often is when you're choosing an OER to ask, even though it's not that large of a population, that if a student wants to purchase or copy a hard copy, that is available for them.
Mm-hmm.
And some OERs have that and some do not. But more and more are. And I still find maybe it's less than 10% of the students in my class, I'm just guessing, but there still are those that really want to be able to have that. And so I think that's important to be able to.
Well,
Really good
if
point.
it's truly open, they should be able to, print. I mean, not be bound, but they should be able to print a copy and, put it in a 3-ring binder or something.
Mhm.
I know the way that depending on the software of the OER, some lend themselves well to print and some of them don't. Depends on if they have interactive elements or something. Obviously, that's not going to print well or print at all. But yeah.
And our team decided, because we did partner with a vendor with the OpenStax, that we decided, and I'm a strong supporter, that it's a single sign-on, that still everything is within Georgia. That's just a strong preference for our team, that everything, including the grade book, was within iCollege, et cetera, so students didn't have to maneuver going back and forth, et cetera. And, with some of the vendors that were partnering with OpenStax, that was not an option.
Okay. Did you use the template? Did either of you use OpenStax has those plug-in modules with the whole course that you supposedly can just put into the course management system or D2L, and I didn't know if either one of you used that.
I haven't tried that. Have you,
Okay.
Nancy?
I have before, because I've taught in the past for eCore, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of faculty do not realize that you can request to have any of eCore's already designed templates for their course.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have done that and then tweaked it, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. That was all the questions I had. Do any of our attendees have any questions for Nancy or Holly?
Looking at the chat, there's not a question in the chat, but I would like to say that I really appreciated the two perspectives and experiences of going through the process of using OER, from creating like a full-blown OER to gradually working OER into your course throughout your time as a professor. And it really does illustrate the reality of the different ways you can do it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too, because I think a lot of, I mean, the the surveys of faculty actually show that one of the biggest deterrents is the time it takes to craft a course around OER. I mean, adopting a new textbook is sort of a, headache anyway, but or should we say a challenge anyway. But to do it with OER sometimes is a little bit even more because of the ancillary materials thing. So I think it's a great point that you can do it a little bit at a time.
Can I add one thing that I
Mm-hmm.
think could be a motivator for other faculty, is that now when students register for a class, there's like a little icon. Do you know what I'm talking about? That
Yes.
shows if you're using these type of materials. At this time, I think it's only for online classes, but I'm trying to find out where it will be the icon for hybrids and face-to-face
Yeah.
too.
It's the low and no cost icons. And the last I talked to the bookstore, which was last fall, it was coming from the bookstore.
Oh,
So one of the hitches in this plan is that the faculty who are adopting OER need to tell the bookstore. And since a lot of it's like free online materials, they don't tell the bookstore. They just say they're not they don't have anything to order. So the bookstore doesn't say it's low or no cost unless you tell them to. If you're not, there's nothing to buy through the bookstore.
I have
So
noticed that working with the bookstore. I know that when, as a faculty member, you go into eFollett, you can choose like I'm using OER resources for
yes.
my course. There's just a button you can click.
Yeah.
That's pretty slick.
Yeah, one of the things that Charlene and I have had to do as part of this OpenStax program is like find out how many faculty are using OER and specifically OpenStax at the beginning of the program and at the end. So even if nobody new adopts OER and they tell the bookstore that they're using it, we will look like we succeeded.
Perfect.
But hopefully they really do adopt OER.
I'll be sure to tell the bookstore.
This is my time to plug. If anybody is listening, if you're using an OER, please let us know. We would like
Yes.
to know. And
Yes.
if you're using OpenStax, you can report it straight to OpenStax or to us.
Yes. Or both. But anyway, any more questions? All right.
I don't see anything in the chat.
I think we guessed on a time just right on this one. It was 30 minutes.
This is fun. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And our next presentation is at 2. It is Higher Education and OER. Is there a social problem? It's a discussion with a class and of students talking about if OER is a social problem. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm gonna have to watch the recording because I'm gonna have to split now. But I really appreciate it, Nancy and Holly, and good to see you again.
Good to see you
Thank
too.
you
Thank
all
you for
Thank you,
setting it up.
guys.
very much.